Next up, we will have nominations for vice chair for 2021. Tom?
Nominate Natasha Edwards.
Okay. We have a nomination for Natasha. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, we have a second from Jonathan, along with the nomination from Tom. We'll do another roll call vote, starting with Tom.
Yes.
Jonathan?
That would be with Corey from
Yes.
I like that. Micro Ann.
Yes.
Okay, Jim Johnson.
Sure, yes.
Carrie Lamson.
That's going to be options that was given to
Yes.
to come together. So,
Natasha, I think you can vote for yourself. But,
Sure.
Terry, there was a lot of hesitation there.
yeah. And I also vote in the affirmative. So we have reelected Natasha Edwards to the position of vice chair by unanimous vote. Congratulations, Natasha.
Damn it, I always give myself 15 minutes.
Okay. Now we've got a busy schedule tonight. Lots of information. I typically try to print everything that we are sent, but I stopped when I saw it was 72 pages and I thought I would look at it on the screen. There's a lot of information there. Okay. So first up is application 2020-721. It's two capital partners. It's a text amendment request to modify the open space provisions in the concentrated multifamily district C-MF. Rob, is this one yours?
This is mine. Good
All
evening,
right.
Mr. Chair. Good evening, members of the Planning Board. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Bear with me. There we go. So this is a text amendment to modify the open space requirements of the C-MF zoning district. This is about the third iteration of what we have gone through. The initial text amendment proposed a large, it was something that staff was not comfortable with. And so on January 13th, we met with the applicant to discuss the proposed solution as we were not comfortable. And then their second iteration, we weren't comfortable with either because it was a wholesale change on the open space section. And I felt could be difficult to administer. Based on this discussion, we kind of came to a middle ground, which both staff and the applicant are comfortable with. And it does adjust the open space requirement in the CMF zoning district. Basically reduces the requirement from 1/35th of an acre in open space to 1/50th. So we're not totally giving up open space in the zoning district. It's just reducing the amount that's required, and also describes some of the open space areas and amenities such as girls' pools, tennis courts, playgrounds, dog parks, and other improved usable areas there are permitted as a part of the required open space. Now, as you all know, the CMF zoning district is a very high density residential zoning district, and so staff tends to think of it more as an urban zoning district, and therefore these types of urban amenities, it's reasonable to consider them as open space. So as you can see, this is the proposed changes with italics and added, and then strike through is what we would be getting rid of. Staff suggests the planning board forward a favorable recommendation of the zoning motion 2020-721, the text amendment to modify open space requirements to the Board of Commissioners as amended. And I would be happy to take any questions. I also have statement of consistency with local adopted policies here, but I'm going to take myself off screen share for that.
Are there any questions for Rob? Tom?
I've got two questions. And the first one may be to either Rob or to Jay. Notice at the end of this section, and this is not a change, but it says if they can't provide things on site, then they have to do it off site within a half mile. I'm wondering, does that mean the whole of the open space or just the excess of what they can't meet on site? As an example, if they could meet everything but 100 square feet, does that mean they have to go find a 100 square foot park someplace within a half a mile?
I think that's a great question, and that was one of the things. That was one of the elements we wanted to leave in there, was the option to provide an offsite open space requirement. I think the intent is to not have it be a leftover piece, but be something that can be used in substantial and be usable open space.
Mm-hmm.
An example?
Oh, an example? So if we had a property that maybe couldn't reach, they wanted to do something that did not include open space on the site, they could find a property a half mile and dedicate it as a park. We felt that was an important thing to keep in there. I don't really have a good example, like in terms of numbers, to give you.
So I can just more things here. So first, it would seem to me that may be something to readdress and clarify at a later date, because it's conceivable that developer is going to want to give a piece of property to the town that the town does not want as a park, or does not want to have to maintain it because of whatever reason. But my main question is this 135th to 150th. It seems like the zoning of this property requires a minimum of 12 units per acre. So a 3-acre site would be 36 units. And by my calculation, that's a difference of now they'd only be required to have 31,000 square feet and change of open area versus 44,000 and change before. That seems like a backwards move from the open space. Is the justification for that because it's in more of an urban zoning?
Yes, sir. And this is the only our other traditional and conditional zoning districts have different open space requirements. This is very specific. 135th acre to the CMF zoning district. So we felt that moving towards with a little more flexibility, moving more towards the intent of this as a higher density residential urban zoning district.
Rob, can you give us an example of a current area that's CMF?
Yes, we have one that is right next to Town Hall. That did not have to provide open space because it was smaller than 3 acres in size, and it is about. Correct me if I'm wrong, Jay. I think it's about 40 units per acre, but there's a small number of units there. It's just a small site.
That's 24 units on a half acre.
Thank you.
I think my only concern is about actually making up for the property you don't have on site and putting it somewhere else. And we're not talking about a lot of property, maybe in some cases. We could be talking about a very small piece of property. What would we even do with that? Or what would an applicant do with that?
Right. Well, I think that is maybe one of the unintended consequences of this, and that language currently exists in the open space requirement now. So it's something that we can look at either defining a little more carefully in terms of having if you're going to do an offsite, it has to be maybe a certain size, or we have a distance requirement now within half a mile. But or if the planning board wants to get rid of that and option, that is certainly something you could recommend.
Would that off-site location be something that the applicant or whoever the developer is, would they have to develop and maintain that, or would it be on the town to take care of that?
It is to be deeded or dedicated to the town after it is approved as a park. So it would be on the town to, it would be public open space.
Okay, so basically, this could work out where if they don't have enough space or don't feel like they want to have enough space there, they just find some property somewhere else, and we don't have, or let's say the Board of Commissioners or the town doesn't have any say-so as to whether that will work in a specific case or not. It could work in all cases.
Yeah, ultimately the decision is up to the town board because it would have to be dedicated to the park. Park would have to be dedicated to the town. So I think that's something that would be part of the conditional zoning process. And if it's not acceptable to the town, then the project doesn't move forward.
That would make me feel a lot more comfortable that we can say yes or no, or the Board of Commissioners can say yes or no based on an individual situation. Jim?
I kind of have a question about the use of this space is for the residents and the public, and it's a high density development, and so they need open space to get out of their place. I don't know why addition of a tree save area is, that to me doesn't seem like a place that you're going to go, enjoy other public people. I think it's a way to get the 150th down to a smaller number. And I don't know where the 135th came from. I'm sure there was some good analysis done on why you need 135th of an acre. And maybe if you go down to 150th, it's like, I did the math. It's like 1,200 feet versus 900 feet per unit. But to me, just having the tree save area included in there just dilutes that even further. So I don't think I'd really support that particular use of land for that.
Mike?
And I would include that swim area, Jim. I think I'm in the same track you are. I was looking back at those things are things that are required to build anyway. And I don't understand how they become part of that, what is now in this 150th percent, because those would be defined two things. One is the swim area would be almost a building permit thing. And then the tree save area is a town mandated, requirement for when we build. So I'm not sure how they get laid in there.
I don't think the swim buffer should be included in that either.
Were those things in there before, guys? Was that part of this C.5 open space requirement?
The swim buffer was, but the tree save area was not. Tree save area has been added, but the swim buffer is currently a part of the open space, eligible open space.
So were walkways, sidewalks, greenways, other features? What was added? Because I
I don't know
Sure.
what the old one was. Yeah,
Let me go back to my screen share and I will show you.
that'd be great.
Okay, so tree save areas, walkways and sidewalks, those were added. They're in italics. Greenways and other environmental protection features, those exist today. Then the other part that was added was usable open space areas. Amenities include such as grills, pools, tennis courts, playgrounds, dog parks, and other improved areas with amenities for residents and or the public are permitted as a part of the required open space. And that gets us to the more urban idea of what what might be considered open space.
I guess. Are you going to say, just simply
Are there any other questions for Rob?
add to this list something quick, something we want to get them to go there.
Rob, I think we have a representative from the applicant with us, don't we?
I mean, exciting.
Yes, we do. Mr. Keith McVeigh and Mr. Lamson, do you have a question for me?
Yes, sir, if I might, just a quick question. I'm assuming that if it's less than 3 acres, there is no open space requirement?
Yes, sir, that is correct.
And that's what it's been consistent in the UDO currently?
That is correct. That is what the current regulation is.
So if we're at 3 acres or less, it's 0 required open space. And if it's 3 acres or larger now, we are going to have a 150th versus 135th requirement for some type of offset that'll be counted as open space, whether that's storm retention, whether it's walkways, it's just a formula at this point.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Planning board members, this is Keith McVeigh with Morvan Allen. We are representing 2 capital partners. The reason we added tree save area was because we also felt tree save areas could be enjoyed by the residents. The tree save areas would be existing trees. The underbrush would be cleared. It could be areas that could be used by the residents or the public. Depending on what trees, large mature trees with a large canopy could be part of a tree save area. So we thought there would be some opportunities for use of those areas by the residents. I don't know the answer to this question, and Rob and Jay may be able to help me. Would the town allow some walkways under tree save areas, not necessarily concrete or asphalt, but natural walkways? Could that be part of the tree save area? In those kind of circumstances, we saw, if that was a possibility, we saw that maybe tree save areas could also be part of the open space requirement. Answering any questions.
Keith, you're breaking up a little bit.
Yeah, sorry about that. My computer audio is can get pretty bad, so
okay.
Happy to repeat. Again, we thought tree save area had some merit as a place where folks could enjoy the tree save areas in the open space area.
And Rob, just to clarify again, maybe I missed it. The current situation is that an applicant can still satisfy the 135th by placing or turning over property to the town that's up to a half mile away?
Yes, sir, that's correct. That is currently in the regulation.
Okay. Okay. Are there any other questions for either Rob or Keith? Carrie.
Thank you, Mike. And Rob, this, I guess, is more of a comment. When I read through this activity, and no disrespect to developers or others, it looks like, number one, we're reducing the total amount that's required by 150th versus 135. But we're now going to begin counting areas like tree saves and sidewalks that were not included in that initial formula as qualified for open space. Is that correct?
Let me take a quick look.
Because I read this as because we're adding things like tree saves is now part of the calculation, and walkways, just as we were previously using storm retention, that's going to continue to reduce the requirement for what I'll call workable or enjoyable open space in the development. So we've both cut the formula down, but we're now including some things that were never allowed to be counted as open space. Or am I misunderstanding that?
No, that is a correct statement, and I believe that the additions to what is considered open space. Now, this just applies to this zoning district, of course. Is unreasonable given there's no maximum density there's no maximum density for the CMF zoning district. So this is something that's meant for higher density projects.
Okay, but for example, can you tell me, I don't know offhand, I apologize, what's the tree save minimum for CMF? What percentage is the tree save minimum for that development formula?
I'm on mute. I'll have to look that up for you real quick.
I think it's 5%, but I'll verify it.
Okay.
But again, to my point then, guys, and I'm just saying, we're now adding the opportunity to count 5% of more space inside that development that we were not counting previously, because they've got to make it a requirement. Now what we're doing is giving them credit for it in open space commitment time. And that's, just as they were required to put a storm retention system in, sure, but that is open space. It has not been something that we hadn't included previously. So I guess I'm taking exception with the couple of things, walkways and sidewalks, and the, quote, greenway pads and the tree saves that are things that we've already got built into the covenants in order to provide a feel that this is an open area. The whole intent was to do that when we set this up originally. I'm surprised we're both reducing the formula and counting more things that will ultimately not make the same impact visually or aesthetically as what we had initially. That's my concern.
Jim?
It seems to me that there's no density limit on this zoning, but part of that might be because you have this requirement, right? I mean, if you're an engineer, you do the math and you go, this is all I can put on here because I have this open space requirement. So I'm hopeful that's why that 35th of an acre was there in the first place.
Okay, yeah.
This is Keith McGinnigan. If I may add, the 1/35th of an acre requirement is a substantial requirement. And I think it's part of the reason this district is very difficult to use. Even at the minimum density of 12 units to the acre, it's requiring 34% of the site to be open space. On the minimum per acre basis, that's a substantial amount of open space. It does let you count a lot of areas toward open space. We felt tree save area was in keeping with swim buffers and stormwater detention areas. It is open space. It's open. It's not covered by buildings and trees. So we thought it was an appropriate element to include as part of the open space. Even at the 1/50th of an acre per unit, once you start getting at higher densities, probably above 21 or even 20 units to the acre, the amount of open space required is fairly substantial. It's starting to approach 50% of the site. Once you get to 30 units to the acre, 25 units to the acre, it's over 50% of the site. So to some degree, it will continue to control maximum density because it is an aggressive standard, even at 1/50th of an acre. At 1/35th of an acre, for example, the site that's before you next month on Northeast Parkway is required to provide over 6 acres of open space on a 10-acre site. That's 60% of the site, which makes it almost impossible to develop as proposed. So and again, at 1/50th, it will have the effect that Mr. Johnson mentioned, where it will control density because you still have a maximum height of 60 feet. You still have
Yeah.
Keith, I appreciate you bringing up in real numbers what this really means for you and other developers. I think my only concern remains the fact that the open area doesn't need to be on your site. It just seems strange to me that, and of course, we do have the checks and balances of approving an individual application or not, but it just seems odd to me that you could take a half an acre, a half a mile down the road dedicated to the town and say, okay, now we can do whatever we want to do on this property. In town of Matthews, you need to deal with the other piece.
Appreciate that, Commissioner Chairman Foster. And we're happy to work with Jay and Rob to add to that existing language, maybe a provision that would say the location of the open space has to be approved by the town so that the town doesn't feel like it has to take anything. Rob did mention, and I agree with Rob, the concentrated multifamily district is a conditional district, so it would require the applicant to say, here's where my offsite open space is, here's what it's going to look like. And then both the planning board and the town board could say, as Rob indicated, no, we don't think that's an appropriate location, that's too small, that's not an open space we want to maintain, or we don't think that has merit as open space, and tell the applicant to provide it on site because the offsite location is inappropriate. You do have that ability to weigh in during the conditional rezoning process. But we could amend our text amendment to add additional wording that would say, the location and the location and or design of the open space is subject to the town approval, so the town doesn't feel like it has to take any proposal that it's given.
Personally, I would feel much more comfortable. I'm not sure that language has to be there, since there is an approval or disapproval at the Board of Commissioners level, but I would feel a lot more comfortable if that language were in there.
If I could, just another question, a question for Keith. How we've talked about the 135th to 150th, and we've also talked about the tree save and walkways and sidewalks. How strongly do you feel about the need to include the verbiage about tree save areas and sidewalks and walkways?
I mean, I'd have to check with the developer, but we could take it out if we needed to. I think it's still in keeping with what was previously there, but if that's a problem for the board, I think we can remove those areas from the text amendment. I would like to hear from Wes Tobble. He's also on the call. I see his name popped up. But I think the area of, we could remove that if need be. The walkways and areas like that are really part of improved open space areas. I mean, you typically would think that would be included. The walkways or areas and other parts are really part of the open space. The tree save area, we can remove it if you feel that's necessary. But Wes,
hey Keith, this is Wes. I think I just wanted to point out a couple things. And Rob, Jay, you please certainly chime in. But I think one of the things that is worth everybody considering is we are one of the first, if not maybe the first, projects in this sort of 7 to 15 acre range that has come through under the zoning designation. And so I think as we've talked with planning and we've looked internally and talked with others in the community, there is a sense of, when these things are written before they're fully vetted on real live projects and understanding the difference of a 3 acre project versus a 4 acre project versus a 10 versus a 12 versus a 15. And 24 units to the acre, 50 units to the acre at a half an acre or an acre versus 16 or 20 units to the acre at 5 acres versus 10 or 12. They have different impacts on the constructability of sites just in general that may have been unintended consequences. They may have been perfectly intended. But when you start thinking about projects that are otherwise in strong locations that meet all the goals and desires of this district, and start talking about, as Keith pointed out, 50, 60, potentially 70% of the site being an open space. I think some came to the opinion or the belief that perhaps as originally drafted, maybe wasn't as prudent in application when you start to see real projects and see how that can play out. And so, I think that's just worth considering. And it was sort of, I think, one of the reasons that there were some recommendations to go with sort of a general text amendment, because this was an application that was broader beyond the sort of specifics of this project. And, we still have to come, regardless of what is sort of determined or decided here, we still got to come through with our project and our site plan and show that we're meeting all the needs of the community, and we have strong design and all the strong planning elements that everybody wants. But as you start to think about, I know Jay and Rob have pushed for more mixed use and trying to create more urban street edges along in Northeast Parkway and the notion of pocket parks and other sorts of things. I think that just comes with some potential understanding or realization that perhaps some of this language as drafted isn't congruent with that necessarily. Specifically to the sidewalk thing as well. Jay and Rob and the rest of the community have pushed us hard to create big, wide, bike lanes and multimodal, connectivity up and down Northeast Parkway, and then strong sidewalk connections within the project to increase that urban accessibility and to create that walkability and create interparcel connectivity to the north and to the south of us. I would at least feel pretty strongly that the sidewalks are in fact some of the best open space we're creating, because it's creating that pedestrian connection. It's creating the ability for that interparcel connectivity to allow people to move throughout the community without getting in cars.
Okay. Thank you, Wes. Are there any other questions for Wes or Keith? Jim?
I will make one comment. I agree with Wes that, the sidewalks and walkways are conducive to people getting out and doing stuff. But I actually think if it's just connecting the parking lot to the building, I wouldn't really consider that too much of an urban opportunity for people to get out of their place. But if you're running around and connecting to other, greenways or sidewalks out on the street or anything like that, that's a longer piece that's away from it, then definitely I agree with you there.
Are there any other questions for Rob?
The only other question I do have is in this swim buffer area. I mean, I have seen how that thing's applied both ways, right? I mean, it's a requirement from a building standpoint, but then how do you incorporate it? And maybe what you're trying to say in here is that you incorporate that into a benefit, but typically that's just a requirement. I would go with you guys on the tree save area and the walkways and sidewalks applied appropriately. But, I think I struggle with adding all those things inclusively without saying, what are the benefits into creating that urban environment that that you're speaking of. So.
Okay. Are there any other questions? Okay. Do we have a motion to recommend, and this is a recommendation to the full board, to either approve or disapprove zoning application 2020-721? Any motion to either approve or disapprove? Or are there any other questions that needed to be answered?
Well, I think the way it's written, I would not support it. So I guess is the discussion about whether we support it the way it is, or can we modify it in some other way? And is that something we should discuss?
I believe we could make a motion to approve based on adding language or eliminating language, or a recommendation to add or eliminate. So, Jim, if you wanted to take a try at that, or if anyone else does, or if anyone has a motion to disapprove as is.
Could also recommend denial, but that you would like to see changes A, B, and C made to the text before it comes up for a final decision.
Who wants to take a stab at it?
Mike, let me make a comment, and then I'm happy if it sounds like it's amenable. I could support this particular text amendment if the petitioner would agree to remove the tree save italicized addition. I'm fine with the walkways and sidewalks and greenways as improvements. Everything else is basically the same. I don't have a problem with the 1/50th calculation, particularly how graciously it allows us to get space if you're adding a very, very high density of units, because as I just heard from the developer, I think in some cases that may still be an aggressive amount. So I would be willing to consider this and approve it if we struck the tree save area terminology, and that we added a comment at the end that said that the property shall be deeded and dedicated to the town after improved as a park and accepted by the town. Something to that nature, to your earlier point about off-site property. That's where I kind of stand. I don't know where everyone else stands, but I would certainly be supportive of that minor change to this and then moving forward.
Okay. So is there any additional discussion about Carrie's comments?
Some people are all like.
I can probably support that position as well. Honestly, I think that's enough of a give and take. And I do think that if it's high enough density, then it spits out a park, and that's not the worst thing for the town either. So.
Okay. Carrie, would you like to put that in the form of a motion?
Could I just, one more
Yes,
comment?
Tom.
So, Carrie, as long as you're fooling around with the last statement there, it might be appropriate to include approval by the town of the size and location, because I'm still concerned about somebody floating out a 100 square foot thing, or or 1,000, or 5,000, something that might be help them meet the requirement, but doesn't necessarily meet the requirements of the town. So could you maybe think about including that in the motion? You're on mute.
I guess, Tom, my only thought there is that all of this is going to have an approval process to it. So for any reason, when we initially consider any of these designations, they're going to need to make that decision at that time. So we'll be approving the entire project, including whatever is or is not able to be fit on those properties.
Okay. All right. Good point.
If that's true, Rob, if you correct me, because if that's the case, I can't see us ever getting into a splinter situation that isn't approved from the get-go one way or the other. I can't see them coming back later after we've approved a site plan and a project and saying, well, by the way, we can't get 100 acres or 100 feet of this particular element. We need to just stick it over here. I think we have to make that a comprehensive decision at the beginning of the process.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Mr. Lamson. That would be a part of the project approval process.
Well, let me try this then. So we're talking about zoning application 2020-721, requesting a text amendment change. I am going to request that the zoning action as currently amended is recommended for approval, subject to the following. First, it has been found consistent with the Matthews Land Use Plan. The text amendment is consistent with the purpose of CMF zoning district to create a higher density residential use while maintaining usable open space. It's also reasonable because the amendment allows for more flexibility in open space development. The recommended approval is subject to one change to the text as written, and that is with the removal of the italicized tree save area as an allowable definition for the open space systems. And with the inclusion at the end of the process that of course, the assumption is that an off-site location or equivalent size is necessary and identified, that public park site will be reviewed and approved by the town as part of the project.
Okay. Thank you, Carrie. We have a motion from Carrie Lamson. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
We have a second from Jim Johnson. Okay, we'll do roll call vote, starting with Jonathan Clayton.
Yes, I approve.
Okay. Mike Rowan.
Yes, I'll approve.
Jim Johnson.
Yes.
Natasha Edwards.
Yes.
Carrie Lamson.
Yes.
And I vote in the affirmative also. So zoning motion.
But wait.
Oh, Tom. I apologize, Tom.
His first vote.
Tom Dorsey.
Yes.
Okay. And I also vote yes. So that does pass unanimously. Zoning application 2021 to recommend approval to the full Board of Commissioners. Thank you, Keith. Thank you, Wes. And thank you, Rob. Okay. But Rob, don't.
Thank y'all very much. Y'all have a great evening.
Okay. Next up, zoning application 2020-723. Rezoning request at 2026 Matthews Mint Hill Road. Change the zoning from R12 to R12 MF for a proposed mix of single-family, duplex, and townhome dwelling units. And this is the application that we had the public hearing on earlier this month. So, Rob, back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to share my screen again, and because we've got lots of drawings to share that are and a small updated site plan. Okay. So some of the comments that were raised at the public hearing, as Mr. Foster mentioned, was earlier this month. No elevations were presented of the townhome buildings. It was also recommended to stagger the townhome units so that they're not all in one line. The applicant mentioned that there would be fencing along the border with the Butler High School, and they would be willing to fence the northern side of the project as well if that is something that is desired by the board. Usable porches, it was suggested, would be a good addition to the duet units. Window placement on the end of townhomes is important, and a color palette was requested. In response to these comments, the applicant has submitted a revised site plan showing driveways that are connected instead of, they're side by side rather than separated, and has also submitted revised elevations of the duets and townhomes that address the concerns raised at the public hearing. The land use plan does not make a specific recommendation for this parcel, but being between a single-family neighborhood and Butler High School, the proposed site plan will provide a transitional land use between these two areas. Staff recommends that the planning board forward a favorable recommendation of the zoning application 2723, change in zoning from R12 to R12 MFCD to the Board of Commissioners. And I'm just going to scroll through. There's our consistency statement. These are some revised plans showing a small usable porch on the duets and the colors. Again, color palette for the duets. And then these are the architectural renderings, Matthews Mint Hill duets. And of course, we can come back to any of these with questions. I'm just going to scroll through so you know what's in the package. Floor plans for the duets. Second floor, more floor plans. And then we also have the rear view of the duet. These are the townhomes, Matthews Mint Hill micro townhomes, they're referred to as. As you can see, they have been staggered. And there's a door in the rear. I think that was a request by one of the commissioners. Floor plans, floor plans, floor plans. And then this is the rear of the townhomes. So one car garage, or sorry, door in the rear. And maybe that's the, okay, some more architectural elevations. This was a color palette. And let's wait for my computer to catch up here. This is a current site plan showing the location. Butler High School is to the south and single family units to the north. With attached details. And then this is a colored version of the site plan. Let me zoom out a little bit. Showing instead of separated driveways, they would be combined on the townhomes, and the duets and single units abut the single family dwelling units.
Rob, are those townhomes, the driveways for those townhomes, is the entire front yard concrete?
It is not. Let me go back to the site plan. You can see when I bring it up, if I can.
Because all I noticed was trees and concrete.
Trees and concrete, yeah. So you'll get actually a better feel for the street level view. That was one of our concerns about having the separated driveways, was that there would be too many of them when you're walking as a pedestrian, that you'll have to look for cars all the time. So let me pull this back up for you. And I mean, we have some trees and some open space in between.
Okay, I see a little green in there now.
Sorry, I had to zoom in a little bit for you. Yeah. We did propose an alley loaded product, but then we determined that would really decrease the amount of open space in the rear of the unit, so they would not. So the people wouldn't have a backyard then.
Mr. Chair, the applicant has a updated presentation they want to share here in a few minutes, and it does have some renderings of that street level view where you can kind of get a better feel for how those driveways are situated.
Okay, great. Okay. Any questions for Rob so far? Rob, I guess I have one question. I think this is the same property that we talked about. I know it's a property we talked about before. I think during our previous discussion on the earlier application, there was concern about water runoff toward the back of that property going onto a neighbor's property. And I know you weren't involved in that one.
I was not. No, that's I remember what you're talking about. Well, I don't remember as I wasn't here, but I am familiar with the previous rezoning. I think that was a single family neighborhood. Proposing in the rear. Let me bring the site plan back up for you. The rear of the property will be mostly undeveloped because there's a large swim buffer that is goes through this area, and water quality will be here next to playground and dog park and bordering the Butler High School.
Okay, so it looks like based on having the retention area or detention area back there, along with the topography, that runoff will end up there and not flowing further back.
I think that is the intent. Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Okay. All right, let's move to the applicants and look at the presentation they have to offer. Mr. Berry.
Good evening, Chairman Foster and members of the Planning Board. My name is Jimmy Berry. I'm the developer with the Berry Company, and with me is Matt Levesque, who is our civil engineer with ESP. We do have a short presentation we would like to go through if that's acceptable, and I think we can better address the question about the front yard as well as the runoff, as well as the items that Rob discussed that came up in the public hearing a couple weeks ago.
Okay,
so go through that.
Please go ahead.
And then I'm curious, will we be loading the presentation or will someone from staff?
So I did download it. It's the largest PowerPoint I've ever seen. It was about 700 megabytes, and I'm happy to share screen. And just FYI, we don't typically do presentations for Planning Board, but I went through it, and you do have all the updates shown with the different colors and stuff. So, I mean, Craig, I think that's permissible to kind of give a short presentation.
Sure.
All right. All right.
And Jay, what we may do then, as the sake of time, is maybe, I think, first slide, everybody's familiar with the location. Next slide, everybody's familiar with the team. Next slide. Slide 3, really the only thing that changed from what we originally presented in the public hearing is the townhome adjacent to Butler High School. Both the individual units have been articulated an additional foot, and then there's additional setback between each of the buildings that I think you will see whenever we go through the video. Next slide, please. The site rendering changed very little. Next slide. So this, the left shows you the duets, and I think what was the previous kind of all white color. And then the townhomes, as was stated, we had not submitted elevations for those. So here's the elevations as well as colored. And then Chairman Foster, you'll see in the video, but what staff had recommended is instead of the driveways being kind of on the left side of every townhome, combining the driveways hopefully provides a more green space between the units than having all of the garages kind of left facing of each of the units. We can go either way, but it did seem that combining the driveways would at least visually create fewer curb cuts along the street edge.
And I'm fine with your graphic right there. I just, in the overhead view, it was so small, it almost did look to me like there was no green area at all. That looks fine to me.
Great. Sounds great. Next slide, please.
And I'll just add, this is multifamily zoning, so there's not going to be property lines here. So, when cars are parked in driveways, that's sort of common area. The way it's the same as you would have for a single family lot or even a RVS townhome platted lot.
There's the proposed color palette. Next slide, please. Floor plans that everyone can look at their leisure. Next slide, please. That's for the townhomes. Next slide, please. Again, our efforts of bringing workforce for sale duets and townhomes to the town of Matthews. Next slide, please. It might be worthwhile to go through the fly-through just so everybody can get a feel for the scale of the streetscape. So, Jay, if you'd be willing to kick that off. And everybody may remember one thing we're real excited about, to have the duets are actually alley fed off of that main street. So those duets are actually going to front on usable open space that all of the duets will be able to share. And as we previously described, it will be a bark park and playground. And this should give you a good feel for the amount of green space between the townhomes.
And when you think even further down the line, so once we really get this all figured out, because we've done it once, and so we'll continue to define and improve as we move forward, hopefully get to an in-person.
And I think one additional comment, in addition to staff notes, we've been asked to address on the duets, not only the front porch, but you'll notice as we fly through, we did add an eyebrow over the garages so that the rear, even though it's the rear and it's alley loaded, you will notice that there is a little more articulation on the rear of the duets with those eyebrows that we'll construct. Of course, Butler High School behind the townhomes. Okay, thank you, Jay. Next slide, please. Again, rendering from the previous, next slide. Amenities from the previous presentation, next slide. Our interior and exterior finishes, same from previous. And then, of course, if the planning board chooses to rule favorably, we'll be going before Board of Commissioners on February 8th. So at this time, we'd be glad to answer any questions that any of the board members may have.
Okay, does anyone have any questions for Mr. Berry or Mr. Levesque? No questions. Gary.
Mr. Berry, if you would do me a favor, I've got some questions regarding the workforce housing comments, and there was a slide that you went through very quickly that kind of laid out a couple of the tenants around what you have in mind. Could you go back to that and review it? It was right before you did the flyover.
Sure. And Jay can pull that back up. I'm happy to kind of describe what's on. So the first is the goal is to bring some for sale product to the town of Matthews that we don't think exists today. At this point, we believe the townhomes will be able to bring to the market starting in the mid 200s, and the duplexes will be able to bring to the market starting in the high 200s. And looking at what currently are the income levels between 80 and 120% of the area median income for the town of Matthews, most people within that area median income range should be able to afford these townhomes and duets depending on their individual circumstances. And then we are willing to deed restrict 4 of the units and deed restrict that the buyers of those 4 units cannot make more than 80% of the area median income. And that will be a 75-year deed restriction that not only will preserve the affordability on being able to target the buyers that make 80% or below of the area median income, but on those 4 units, we'll also deed restrict that when those initial buyers turn around and sell those units, they will only be able to sell those units for what they paid for the unit, plus whatever bona fide improvements that they've made, plus whatever increase in CPI would take place from the time which they bought till the time that they would sell. Because a lot of times what will happen in situations like this is if they're brought to the market today in a workforce price range, the market typically will drive the prices up to where the market is, and they can lose the affordability component. So we're willing to deed restrict 4 of the units to prevent that from happening.
I appreciate that, and I understand the program. I have a couple of questions. One, if you were presenting this plan to Davidson or Carey, I'm curious why it's only 4 units. Typically, there's a 10 or 15% offset in those types of developments, which would mean I'd love to see this be closer to 8 or 10 units. But again, we don't have any regulations to that effect. I'm more concerned about how you're going to administer this program. Who is going to handle the qualification, certification, sale, resale, improvement tracking, and so forth? Are you providing a third-party service that's going to do this? You're going to have 1,000 applicants for 4 homes. And those types of circumstances typically require a large amount of due diligence, credit search, but also qualification search. And I'm also curious if there are some other conditional criterion that would be put in place, such as if you're a town employee, you'd be moved into the list and be considered as a better candidate than if you weren't. Has there been any discussion or any detail put together yet around those types of activities that would be required?
Not for this project specifically, but the way we would move forward, since to our knowledge, the town of Matthews does not have potentially, and I guess if the town of Matthews, that's something that they're willing to participate in, both checking, if you will, initially and long term. That is something that we are open to. As we discussed earlier, we just closed and broke ground on the first workforce townhome community in Mount Pleasant, South Carolina. In fact, the townhomes that we're proposing in Matthews are exactly the townhomes that we'll be building in Mount Pleasant. Mount Pleasant vehicle has a Housing for All Mount Pleasant, which is a 501c3 that's able to check all the incomes, et cetera. What we would intend to do with the town of Matthews, if no one had an interest from the public perspective of monitoring that, is there would be a deed restriction that would be placed on the property. So when a buyer or a closing attorney does their due diligence, that deed restriction will be there. We're willing to sign an affidavit that, the initial buyers, we would vet to confirm that they made no more than 80% of the area median income. This community, once we complete it, will have a homeowners association. And so there will be, since it is townhomes and duets, which are attached, there will be a homeowners association in perpetuity because each of the buildings are going to be insured by the HOA. All of the lawn maintenance is going to be maintained by the HOA. So, we can set it up so that HOA is somewhat the police of that affordability component, that it will be in the deed that the buyer can make no more than X, and when they're resold, they can resell for no more than Y. But, outside of there being some public entity that would be willing to do that, we definitely would be willing to include it in the deed restrictions and have the homeowners association manage that in the future.
I understand. And I think my concern in this is not so much your offer in this process, but there are a whole lot of other details to be able to utilize these and manage them for the next 50 or 70 years than just the first sale. I think the town and yourselves, they need to put together some specifics around this. I don't see any conditional notes in the site plan to your comments. I don't know how we document those details, but I would certainly welcome seeing any of that as well as any of the sort of guidelines that you might propose to the town that are needed. We have studied this process in the past. I believe the town could understand what's required. There are third-party agencies that could step up and do those other types of details, credit checks and certifications and so on. But it doesn't just happen because we put a conditional note in your development and allow you to do this. Secondary question, how are you going to market and sell these particular units as opposed to the rest of the community?
Have not decided that. Don't know if we're going to do it ourselves or some third party agent. That's still to be determined. It's going to be interesting to determine what the demand is.
Trust me, as I said, you will have no different. The problem will be that we will not be able to determine who the qualified for purchases will be.
Right, and I don't know what. Probably, if the demand supply, the most fair way is probably a lottery. Unfortunately, due to fair housing, I don't think we can let one group take precedence over another. And so there may be a lottery. On your other comment too, we are happy to provide. We already have a purchase and sale agreement that identifies all of the income and qualification matters that have to be met to meet that 80% of AMI, and we already have the master deed. And so we've got the documentation and are happy to work with the town of Matthews on if there is a third party that can manage that affordability in perpetuity, or at least for the 75 years, we're happy to do that.
All right. Well, as I said, I think this is on the town's responsibility. We're as responsible now to define these things before we get to the point where we're approving this without understanding exactly what we're biting into this apple with. I think it's a great program. I think it's more than needed. It will be easily oversubscribed, and my concerns are more about the management of it and its preservation beyond 10 or over those 75 years. I'd like to continue to see these properties, market pricing adjusted, be workforce-based housing for at least some families in Matthews. And again, preferably for town employees if we need to find criterion that could help limit that list down for that going forward. But that's a decision that our board needs to make. And I think staff also should just be aware that we need to spend some time. I recommend they do that, working with you to try to put something together that could be presented to the board as to just the basic elements. I understand the deeds and so forth, but just let's talk one step down from that, which is who will actually do the selling, who will determine who the qualified buyers are, who will manage these activities in the event that this moves forward. Fair enough?
Fair enough. Thank you.
Thank you for your help. Thank you.
I will add to that conversation, Tony, the Charlotte Housing Partnership might be a good resource. They do handle for rent and for sale. I'm not sure if they partner with private sector developers. I think they do.
They do.
That could be an excellent resource potentially. They do it. Contrary to the name, they do work outside of the city of Charlotte and the region.
Okay.
Tony, I hope this would encourage you, since we're talking about holding a lottery, because the demand will overwhelm the availability of your 4 units. And hopefully it would encourage you to consider more projects like this, whether it be in Matthews, outside of Matthews, because it's something we need. And hopefully this will be the start of something very new that we can really build on very quickly.
Right. And frankly, the 4, I mean, is a start. I mean, hopefully when you see what we're proposing, I mean, we would like to probably sell them all in the mid 200s and the high 200s, because we're offering a level of finishes that even to meet those price points, you know, it's still going to be a market base. But, you know, the discussions that we had very early on with some of the council members and with staff is hopefully this is a catalyst. Hopefully it's a start, and, you know, maybe some of the documentation that we can provide and what we can do here together just on this small subset, hopefully will be something that the town can grow from. And absolutely, if we can find other opportunities with or near the town of Matthews to do this, even on a larger scale, we would be more than happy to do that. But it felt like this was a very unique opportunity to do it this way as a start.
Yeah, it's to see what happens. And I think everybody knows what's going to happen, which is going to be a good thing. Obviously, you're not going to have quite the margin on homes that you're selling for that price point, but you can certainly make up for it in quantity versus quality, hopefully, too. Mike?
Yeah.
You're on mute, Mike. Still on mute.
I know. My point was, would you consider 5 though? Is there a way to? I understand, 6 is probably pushing just in the fact of just the number of units that you have. But would you look at? Could you make that work at 5?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I think that would be a wonderful move.
Yes, sir. And I hope it goes without saying that, I mean, the towns in the mid 200s right now, they're a lot of availability for, as long as someone does not have a lot of debt. There's availability for financing with up to, financing, and, payments on 250 with where interest rates are today. I mean, we'll have people buying townhomes in Mount Pleasant that, pay more for a 2-bedroom apartment. So even though it would only be limiting to 5 that make up to 80% of the area median income, the townhomes still themselves, I think, are still going to be very attractive, something that doesn't exist today. And these real excited about bringing, kind of a duplex. And if you take a few minutes and look at those floor plans, I mean, that's a 3-bedroom, 3-bath with a double car garage, 1,400 square foot home that someone will be able to buy, hopefully under 300. And so I think we're doing more, hopefully, than just the 5 workforce units. I hope the other products are going to be very well received, and I don't think they exist newly constructed today in the town of Matthews.
And I'll make a statement. I appreciate the product that you're bringing to the town. I think it will be well received, personally.
Natasha.
Yeah, I would like to also commend you on bringing this type of product to our area. I think Carrie and I were on a subcommittee for affordable housing on the planning board, and something that he and I are both passionate about. And I know other members on the board are also concerned about that. So thank you. I can't wait to see it, and I hope this will encourage you to do more. My one comment is, could you make sure your roads are not that shiny? Great, because I think people might get a little confused and slip. So
the program won't let them not be shiny, so
okay,
it kind of comes with it.
They will not be that shiny.
Just one other question. Speaking of roads, these are all shown as private alleys and private roads. So what's the maintenance understanding? Is the HOA got responsibility? Trash pickup services and those things. How will that work within your organization?
Sure. The goal would be, of course, all the roads and alleys will be private. The HOA will have a reserve that will be set up as part of the dues, pay future repair and replacement of those. Our goals would be, though, that for it to be more like a neighborhood, our goals would be that trash would be more roll away, not we don't show a dumpster enclosure on the site plan, and our goal would be that trash actually would be, more of a roll away at the curb, which is more like a neighborhood than like everybody, carries their trash down to a dumpster, which would be more like an apartment.
And you have enough access down those alleyways if Republic Waste or someone were to try to go and do the pickups there, or would you have destination pods somewhere where they'd have to move their rollaways too as a centralized area? Do you know that?
Do you have it?
Yes, yeah, they're built. They're 22 feet wide, and then we do have turnarounds at the end of those alleys where they exceed 150 feet.
Thank you.
Okay. Does anyone have any other questions for either Tony or Matt? Any other questions for Rob? Okay. Do I have a motion on zoning application 2020-723? Don't be shy. So there are no other questions. Natasha?
I can make a motion. I'm just trying to find the statement.
If I can share screen, if that will help you.
That would be wonderful. Yay. Okay. I make the recommendation. Okay, so this is for zoning application 2020-723. I make a motion for a recommendation for approval. It is consistent. The rezoning is consistent with the land use plan because it will provide a variety of housing styles, densities, and locations, and encourage design and construction of alternative style housing and infill development. It's reasonable because this application provides for transitional land use between the high school and a single family neighborhood.
Okay, thank you, Natasha. We have a motion from Natasha Edwards. Do we have a second?
Would you, Natasha, could you amend that to add the additional
Oh, sorry.
To add the additional home.
Oh, yes, of course. Yeah. To add the fifth, I amend my recommendation to say that we would like to add a fifth home that would be provided at 80% of the median income.
And I'll second that.
Thank you.
Okay. We have a motion by Natasha Edwards and a second from Mike Rowan. This time I will start with Tom Dorsey.
Yes.
Okay. Jim Johnson?
Yes.
Natasha Edwards?
Yes.
Jonathan Clayton?
Yes.
Carrie Lamson?
Yes.
And Mike Rowan?
Yes.
And I vote yes too. So application 2020-723 passes unanimously.
Thank you, guys. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay. Next up, if I get my paperwork in order, administrative amendment for Ridge Church, request to modify certain site plan elements and conditional notes. Darren, all yours. Darren, we can't see you right now. If you're speaking, you must be on mute.
Okay. Sorry about that. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right. Okay, so this is an administrative amendment for Ridge Church located at the intersection of Independence Point Parkway and Matthews Mint Hill Road. So the applicant is they're going to be showing the location of 2 playgrounds on site. They're also going to be proposing some temporary awnings during the phased development. And then they'll also be showing a proposed fence along the right-of-way on Independence Point Parkway and Matthews Mint Hill Road. I did have a letter from the applicant. I'll highlight a few details from the letter as we go through it. I'm scrolling down to the current site or the proposed site plan. Okay. So the applicant is showing 2 playgrounds. There'll be 1 playground located in the rear, be located here, and then there'll also be a playground located at the corner of Independence Point Parkway and Matthews Mint Hill. As far as changes to the site go from the proposed playgrounds, the first playground in the rear, it'll actually be replacing some parking that was provided initially. That parking, they'll still be over the minimum parking ratio for the site. There was only 110 spaces required, and with this new site plan, they'll be at 131. And then for the second amendment that they were looking at making, they were proposing temporary awnings. Zoom in a little bit. These were fabric awnings. So here's a sample photo that was provided by the applicant. The location will be, it'll be at the corner of the building or the front of the building, right in the little plaza area by the intersection. And then what we mean by the phase development, so there were 4 different phases to this development. Scroll down to the previously approved plans. So the last phase of which it did include the addition of a new building to connect the two. Here we go. All right, so it was broken up into phase 1 and phase 2, and then those phases were further broken down into phases 1A and 1B and 2A, 2B. Right now, the project's in phases, I believe it's 1A and 1B. So the fabric awnings would be put in place until the end of the project, which would be at 2B. And then just to highlight something, scroll down to the approved elevations. A little too far. There we go. Right, so this is looking at the property from Matthews Mint Hill Road. This would be the permanent awning that would be replacing the fabric awnings at the end of the project. It's not where the current building or the building extension is being proposed. It would be an addition that would be added later on. And then for that last point, if we can scroll back up. Okay. And then for the fence proposal, it will be a 4-foot tall picket style fence. They did provide example of the photo or example photo. So as far as the fence location is concerned, there is a planned multi-use path along Matthews Mint Hill Road. It'll be about 11 inches or 18 inches from the back of the multi-use path. So start about at the corner of the existing building, come back up to the sidewalk, follow the path back down Matthews Mint Hill. When it ties back into the pedestrian network, there are going to be 2 pedestrian gate crossings. And then it'll come back towards the intersection and then follow through or go back down Independence Point Parkway. One note on the fence. So this area was to be dedicated for the future right-of-way. They are including a note in the administrative amendment so that when the time comes for that right-of-way to be dedicated, the fence will be moved by Ridge Church. And then they're also including notes that should the fence along Matthews and Mint Hill interfere with any future NCDOT right-of-way widenings, the fence will also be moved. And then that concludes the staff memo. If there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them. And then believe the applicant has prepared a short statement as well.
Darren, is that shift in Independence Point Parkway do we know when that may possibly take place? I thought it was going to be sort of part of the entertainment district project across the street at one time. But I know if it's DOT, it may not be happening anytime soon.
Mm-hmm. So right now, NCDOT is not able to provide a timeline, and the town is unaware of any timeline when that right-of-way may be widened.
So it'll happen someday. Until then, don't worry about it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Any questions for Darren? Okay. If we have the applicant online, we can go to the statement.
Hey guys, my name is Chip Cannon. I'm a landscape architect with JPC Designs. I did the original rezoning with Ridge Church on this a few years ago now. I'll keep it kind of short and sweet. We are requesting the administrative amendment to the approved rezoning at the request of town staff, basically to provide clarity and to make the minor modifications primarily to the awnings. We did anticipate these things in the approved rezoning, though, the fence and the playgrounds were not graphically indicated on the plan. Implementation of these will allow us a little bit more flexibility in using the site in the short term until we continue with our larger projects provided for in the rezoning. One thing to note with the plan, we wanted to maintain the intent and the integrity of the rezoning, so we just updated that rezoning plan with these couple of items so we wouldn't lose sight of the ultimate goal here. Also, all of these items are either approved on the rezoning or are by right items. Again, this is really just for clarity. The playgrounds, they were actually called out, and one of the notes on the approved rezoning allowed as an incidental and accessory use. The fence, I think, is something that's allowed on any private property so long as it meets certain fence requirements. I think the town wanted a little bit more clarity on the location and extents of the fence due to its adjacency to rights of way. And then to your point, Mr. Foster, there's the whole what's going on with the road improvements here that nobody really knows what's going on or when those are going to happen. So we are trying to be sensitive to that. And again, I have included some language in the notes relative to moving the fence at that time of right-of-way dedication. The fabric tension awnings, if you look down at the old Savor Cafe there, it's where the church has their new cafe on the southwest corner of that building. And as you guys know, we live in the south, and in the summer, during the afternoon, that southwest exposure gets really, really, really hot. So I think the church wanted to do something as an interim step to provide some kind of protection from the elements, whether that's that hot sun that they would provide some shade for, or rain, until that point in time that they do the full expansion and can, at that time put on the awnings as provided for in the rezoning. Those would be more, heavier architectural type awnings made out of aluminum product. So I think those were just cost prohibitive at this time. And then, of course, the fencing, as we've gotten into COVID times, the church recognizes the need for using their outdoor spaces more. I think their goal and intent is to start doing a lot more outdoor services. As they've done a few of these and had some other events out on the lawn, they recognize the heavy traffic on both of these roads, and when they have a lot of folks gathered out there, what's to keep a kid from running out into the street, so I think that just as a measure of safety for their parishioners and community members that would be using the space, the fence is just added protection that I think keeps everybody a little bit safer. I think I'm going to leave it at that. Again, with the COVID times, they've kind of had to rethink how they want to use the space, and a real priority has been placed on these outdoor spaces. So, we think that these items are in keeping with keeping their parishioners and the larger community safer. We're happy to answer any questions, and we've got the pastor, Chris Brown, on as well. If he'd like to add anything, feel free, Chris. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Chris, do you have any comments?
First, Mr. Chair and Planning Board members, thanks for what you do, and thanks for the time. I think Chip hit all of the high points. We've been working with Jay and Darren, who've been fantastic, and we hope and believe that what we're doing will be mutually beneficial to the community as well. That's one of our dreams, is we want the community to be better because we're in it, and vice versa. So, I think he hit the high points. I'm happy to answer any questions that I can, or anything that I can't. Perhaps Chip can. So, but anything that you guys want to ask or any clarifications, we welcome those.
Okay. Thank you, Chris. Do we have any questions for either Chip or Chris? Mike?
Yeah, what's the life expectancy of these canvas awnings?
They're pretty heavy duty fabric. I couldn't tell you right off the top of my head, but they're put in all over the place these days, and it's pretty beefy canvas. I would have to think that anything being put on the market has got to have a pretty good warranty associated with it. Chris, with some of his dealings with vendors, may have more specific information, but they're pretty heavy duty.
We haven't sourced any specific ones, but obviously it's better for us if they're heavy duty too. We don't want to be replacing them, and we have a pretty high value on the way the environments look as for us and for the community. So we haven't sourced the specific ones yet.
Fair enough.
Jim?
I'm curious about the awnings as well. I guess you do need permission from us to put them up. Is that true, Darren, that they have to get the board to approve putting those up? Seems like they could almost do that without our approval. But I am curious, and I may have missed it. Is there a rendering of how that will look from Matthews Mint Hill Road or Independence Point Parkway? Just to get an idea, are they going to be so obvious that when you're driving by, you're like, whoa, what are they doing over there? Or are they just kind of like subtle, just sun coverings?
Darren, I can speak to this, or you can. You let me know when to jump in.
You can go ahead.
In terms of your guys' approval of it, I think the concern that Jay and Darren had was because we were making an amendment to the proposed, that we wanted to make sure that flew by you guys and you had eyes on it to maintain the integrity of the future project. So I think it was more that. And then we don't have an elevation of what this will look like from the streets, but I think my kids have played a lot of sporting events across the street at the Sportsplex, and I think there's a ton of very similar to what we're looking at. I think over a lot of the playgrounds and things there, you'll see something similar. So they're pretty common in parks. Ballantyne area, I saw several of the outdoor common areas. Ballantyne Village had these similar ones, but we don't have particular elevations of them, but because they are fairly common around. So I don't know if I've seen any in Matthews, but yeah, so I don't know how helpful that is.
And I'll add real quickly, this is one of the items that staff, typically, any business will be able to put these things up. I think staff wanted us to include these things because in the approved rezoning, on the elevations, it showed these, flat aluminum, big awnings coming right off the building. So because there was a departure from that, and the fact that, we wanted to maintain that going down the road, and these are just interim, they felt it better to go ahead and include these.
Natasha?
Just to answer, I've worked with these kind of shade systems before, and they're nice looking. I feel like that we have some at the YMCA at that new portion of the like that playground that is over there. So there's similar ones there, and I mean, I've used them on the 65 plus neighborhoods I've worked on before in the amenity areas. So I mean, I think they work actually pretty nice, and I think they have a decent. And I'm not trying to answer questions for people. I just have a little knowledge on these things. I feel like there's at least a 10-year warranty on those types of structures. I would say at least 10 years would be my guess. So yeah.
I actually just saw some on Monroe Road in Charlotte, the new retail development in the by the Mary Oak School, just north of Sharon Amity. There's a plaza between two of the buildings, and they have these things up now. They look really nice.
One of the questions regarding these sales, we haven't had any discussion about at what height you're going to hang these. And to Jim's point, it does face Matthews Minhill Road, the area that you plan to temporarily install them. The second is, depends on what color they are, how noticeable they are. The photo you gave us as an example is bright blue. I would suggest that's not as favorable as your building color palette, but it would be interesting to understand, are you going to limit the height of these to no more than 10 foot or to the side of the building? How will that look in proximity to the structure that's there?
I think the height is probably going to range because typically these things are tilted to provide better shade. And because of the way that they are arranged, the lower end would be pointing towards the intersection. I feel like that lower end would probably be, in the 8 to 10 foot range, and then up towards the building where they would kind of swoop up. They may be, in that 12 to 15 foot range, but I don't think any higher than that.
And is that could you estimate, is that what the permanent structure height is? I can't tell from the
permanent structure height. Let me check my elevation real quick here. I would assume it's probably close to that 10 to 12 foot height. Okay. Yeah, it looks like most of these are just, kind of roughing it off here. I would say probably 3 feet above the top of door elevation. So again, we're looking at that 10 to 12 foot range. I think it would be very similar.
Okay. So still mid-building kind of mounting structure, which again would not make it that obvious, even if it's from the road. And again, depending on the angles, you mentioned there may be a couple of them with 2 different orientations to them because of the shading requirement. Okay, thank you.
And this is a midterm, right? This is your midterm solution as you go through this. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Chip, is this the site you referenced? Are these similar awnings that you're talking about?
Yes, that's the one.
That's nice, Jay. Thanks.
Yeah. There's some benefit to these Zoom meetings.
Sometimes.
Okay. Jim?
One final comment. I assume since you're asking our permission to put them up and it's in lieu of putting the permanent structure up, that you would then, I guess, assume you remove them when you put the permanent structure up. These would be not there after you finish the other construction.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Are there any other questions for Chip or Chris or Darren? Okay. I believe since this is an administrative amendment, we have the option of approving it through the planning board or pushing it over to the full board of commissioners for final approval. So any motion could be made for final approval, recommendation to recommend, or denial. So do I have a motion? Carrie.
I'd be happy to make a motion on the administrative amendment from Ridge Church. The requested zoning action as currently amended. I recommend final approval of this request, given that it's consistent with the Matthews land use plan as follows. The changes are consistent with the land use plan, and the plan designates the areas on Independence Point Parkway to encourage parking. and at the rear of the buildings, and consolidation of the driveways. The fencing provides both protection and aesthetic value around the children's playground areas. The changes help promote the area toward transit-oriented development at the pedestrian level. I also believe they're reasonable, as that they are not significantly different from the original zoning approvals and are there in an interim basis until such time that the plan is completed.
Thank you, Carrie. We have a motion to approve from Carrie Lamson. Do we have a second? Mike Rowan?
I would second.
Okay, we have a motion to approve from Carrie, a second from Mike Rowan. We will do a roll call vote, starting with Tom Dorsey.
I approve, yes.
Jim Johnson.
Yes.
Natasha Edwards.
Yes.
Jonathan Clayton.
Yes.
Mike Rowan.
Yes.
Carrie Lamson.
Yes.
I also vote yes, so that's unanimous approval for administrative amendment for Ridge Church. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you. Good evening.
Okay, next, public improvement variance review of proposed parkland dedication, Adam Fiorenza, Sam Newell Road and Lakeview Circle. Request to remove curb and gutter and sidewalk requirement. Rob?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Now it's public improvement time, public improvement variance time. All right, let me share my screen. All right, so Four Corners P1 LLC is requesting public improvements variance to remove curb and gutter requirement for the minor 9-lot subdivision to be located on Lakeview Circle, as well as the requirement for the multi-use path and sidewalks. And the reason is based on logistical challenges on this section of Sam Newell Road. These requirements are required by the UDO. And proposed solution, staff feels that these are appropriate based on both the lack of this being an undeveloped area and surrounding the site and the dimensions of the property. Staff recommends approval of both variances. Additionally, the proposed subdivision is only 9 lots and will not use any new streets or other public infrastructure. And then I have this is Sam Newell facing south. As you can see, it is, there's no curb and gutter. It's just ditch and swale. And then Lakeview, it's a little narrower street, again, with no curb and gutter. So an aerial photograph of the property, the red lines indicate where the applicant is requesting no curb and gutter or sidewalk along Lakeview Circle, and then requesting no curb and gutter and no multi-use path along Sam Newell. This is the request letter, and let me zoom out a little bit. Unfortunately, I have been unable to rotate this plat, but so we kind of have to look at it sideways. We have Sam Newell Road here, proposed 6 lots. And then here is Lakeview Circle, with proposed 3 lots. The rest of the area will be proposed to be donated to the town for use as a park. And let me scroll back up. And I will turn it over. I'll turn it over to answer any questions or comments that the board may have at this time. I can always screen share again.
Thanks, Rob. Are there any questions for Rob?
Just a quick question. So this is to not have to put the sidewalks in on both of those little locations marked in red. Is that right?
Yes, sidewalks and curb and gutter, because there's no curb and gutter on the streets now.
Okay. I mean, I noticed there's some just up the road at the school, some sidewalks. So if they don't do it, it won't connect. I mean, if they put a little park in there when they want someone to use those sidewalks to get in there. I like connectivity and I do a lot of running, so it'd be nice to have connections when they're available. And this site's going in. I don't see why they can't put. I understand Lakeview Circle. It's a small neighborhood road, and there's none in there. But on Sam Newell, I kind of would envision those being the case in the future. So, I don't know, just my thought.
Rob, is the request to delete the curb and sidewalk tied directly to the dedication of the property, or are they two separate issues?
They are two separate issues, sir.
Okay. Okay. I see we have Mr. Fiorenza there, and I hope I'm pronouncing your last name right, Adam. Do you have any words that you would like to include?
Good evening, everybody. Appreciate your time. The only thing I would add is that what we're trying to do here has just been a tricky site. I've owned it for several years now and had tried to figure out several different ways to develop it and do a few more homes, but it just wasn't really working out that well based on the topography and things. So in working with Jay and Rob and the needs for that stretch, I would say, Mr. Clayton, on the what will eventually be the multi-use path along Sam Newell. There were some comments that came back and forth from from town engineers as to the desire of where that path might be located. There's some cedar trees there now. Should we take those down? Should we leave them? So what we tried to do was just say, well, it sounds like there's still some unknowns on that particular part of the multi-use path. So rather than try to really determine exactly where that needs to be right now, we thought it'd be nice to leave that little bit of space that Rob had shown on the plan to be able to access the land that we'll donate. And then in the future, you all do have plans to add that multi-use path all the way up Sam Newell Road. So we thought it'd be a nice tie-in through there.
Okay. I assume, like most other projects, and this is an NCDOT, isn't it? Is that correct, Rob?
Unfortunately, yes.
Yeah. Okay. So it's not going to be anytime soon. I think we've gotten a full understanding of that over the last few months.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So if you put it in now, it may be kind of a waste of time and money at some point in the future.
That has been my experience in dealing with NCDOT over the years, yes.
Yeah. So in lieu of that, would you be willing to basically put the curb and gutter along your piece of the property whenever NCDOT makes that move?
Well, I'm not sure NCDOT will want that in that particular stretch, to be honest with you. We're not exactly sure what improvements they'll require. And I think what we were trying to do is move past that a little bit in terms of just being able to provide, the use of the park property through there more than anything. But to get an answer from DOT on what they'll approve, I think in the future their intent may be to widen that road. So to go ahead and put in those improvements now, as you said, would likely just be torn up at some point in the future as well.
Right. And the property that you would want to dedicate for future use as a park, is it just basically difficult to build property, or is it impossible to build property?
No, it's not impossible. It's a grading challenge. It falls off a decent amount on the backside. So to be able to do a road, and what the town had wanted was a road that connects from Sam Newell back to Lakeview Circle. So to be able to build a road with the proper grade down through there, and then put in things like detention and the streets and all the other things that we need to do, it's a massive dirt moving project, if you will, for just a few amount of lots that we would be able to do on that particular piece.
Yeah. Okay. Are there any questions for Adam? Questions for Adam? Any questions for Rob? Okay.
This is Kerry. I've got one. As a public improvement variance, did this or does this need to go through some type of public hearing or community communication?
That's a great question. No, the process for a public improvement variance is to go to the planning board and then for recommendation, and then to the town council for final approval and decision. There is no requirement for a public hearing. Such as
there were no postings on this property that required because it wasn't something that was going to be available to the public.
That's correct. It is. It's different than a other type of variance that we would have maybe with the Board of Adjustment, where we post the property and notify the neighbors.
I understand. The reason for my question, and this goes back to the Four Corners development that the developer did on the other side of the street. It seems that Lake Circle Drive has some very conscientious citizens. They were very much involved in what was going to happen on both sides of that street there at that intersection, I recall. And I know that he's worked diligently to work with those individuals to get agreements to be able to develop and so on. As I always am, I'm just issuing a question or a concern that something like this would go to the Board of Commissioners, and they might realize that there are information that should be circulated in some way, shape, or form so that people have the ability to comment. That's all I was asking the question. So it's not a requirement. It's just one of my concerns. If it's not a requirement to do so, then great. I just want to make sure I'm on the record that in the past, we've had this particular area in particular, that Lakeview Circle property area has been discussed rather heavily in open public forums and in public comment sections of town board meetings in the past.
Thank you, Kerry. Mike?
Yeah, and I agree with Kerry. This piece did come up. Now, where is that greenway? Is that Irvin's Creek? Wasn't that Irvin Creek? Wasn't that close to all this? What was that greenway that we were discussing before in comparison to this property? It's on the. I'm looking it up. It's on the other side of Lakeview. Is that correct? Is that where the greenway would come into play? Does anyone know?
Yes, it's the kind of where I'm moving the cursor here. It's the Irvins Creek Greenway. Kind of run up here.
And any requirement, we're not doing anything on Lakeview Circle from an access standpoint for that. And my only question, I'm only just looking at it saying, okay, well, if we're looking at making that some kind of part, how do you tie that in? I need to go back, I guess, to his land plot. Let me see what he was doing.
And I apologize. I put this as one agenda item. If it's easier to make a decision on the public improvement variance and then talk about the parkland dedication afterwards,
maybe
then
so.
we can go that route.
For me, I think that helps, Jay.
Okay.
Because I think I'm confusing the two.
Okay. Are there any other questions for Rob or for Adam? Okay. Based on Jay's recommendation, it sounds like we can and should separate the two issues here.
I think so.
And have motions on each. And in both cases, these motions would be to either approve or not approve recommendation to the Board of Commissioners. Okay. So separating them, we will take the curb and gutter issue into the first piece. Do we have a motion on that part of the public improvement variance? any motion either way to approve or disapprove?
I'll give it a shot.
Okay, Tom?
All right. I'd like to, and there's no zoning number or variance number on this, but I'd like to move to approve the variance requests in connection with the 9-lot subdivision to be located on Lakeview Circle. And again, recommendation for approval because found to be consistent with Matthew's land use plan.
You don't need to do all that. I mean, that's fine. You don't have to do
Okay.
that.
All right, good. I stop.
Okay, we have a motion from Tom Dorsey to recommend approval of the deletion of curb and sidewalk from the property. Do I have a second? Natasha?
I second. Sorry, I can't get to the mute fast enough tonight.
All right. So we have the recommendation for approval, a motion to approve from Tom Dorsey, second from Natasha Edwards, and this is strictly related to the deletion of the curb and sidewalk from the property. So we will vote starting with Tom Dorsey.
Yes.
Jim Johnson.
Yes.
Natasha Edwards.
Yes.
Jonathan Clayton.
Yes.
Mike Rowan.
Yes.
Kerry Lamson.
Yes.
And I would also vote yes. So deletion of curb and sidewalk is recommended for approval by the full Board of Commissioners. Now, part 2, the dedication, I believe it was a little over 8 acres to the town for use as a future park. Do I have a motion for that part of the public improvement variance?
So, Mr. Chair, I don't know if we need a motion. I was just reading the UDO. It just says the planning board is to review the sketch plan and make and comment on it, basically. Okay. So it's,
so it's just notes to the minutes, I guess, at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I did. So I think Shana, it's correct in the packet, Rob. I found a version that's not flipped here. So we don't turn our head sideways. But yeah, it's just the Park and Rec directors reviewed it and said, yes, we think we can make some use of it for public recreation. Looking for any additional comments from you all.
We recommend you use it for park and recreation.
Yeah. Are there any other comments from anyone that they would like to see entered into the record?
This is Kerry. I want to support what Mike mentioned as well, and that is if there's any way that this park could be more than just a pocket park, but in some way, shape, or form, long-term, connected to the Irwin's Greenway. We could make use of this as a combination of sorts, or in some way find linkages that might make it much more effective and accessible.
Yeah, and valuable to the community.
Okay. Any other comments, statements for the record? I would just personally like to add my thanks to Mr. Fiorenza for the dedication or the offer for dedication of the property for a park. I think it's a great idea. I think Matthews is getting to be known more and more as the town that has parks for everyone. We have parks in many locations all through the town, and I think it gives just about every citizen the opportunity to go visit one of these parks and not have to travel any distance whatsoever to get there. I think it's great.
I'd like to say one thing. I'd like to see that park maybe as just more of a natural park with some trails on it. So I know a lot of mountain bikers utilize trails like that all the time. It'd be nice to see that instead of just bulldozing it and putting equipment out there. That's just my take.
Good point. I think we have some other pending park properties, so we could use, do a phase 1, a phase 2, which I think we've done with some other locations for parks too, but leaving it as natural as possible, just with walking trails, I think it's a great idea. Okay. Any other comments? Okay, great. Thank you, Rob. Thank you, Adam. We appreciate it.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks. And next, public improvement variance at 336 Whitefriars Lane. Request to allow an existing unpermitted structure to encroach into the swim buffer. Rob, is this one yours?
This one is mine, and
You're the star tonight.
We're on the home stretch, y'all. All right, so this is kind of a unique circumstance. So I'm going to walk you through some of the reasons why we've got to do a public improvement variance. I'm going to share my screen. I've got a short sort of presentation. So the request, as the chair had mentioned, the applicant is requesting a public improvement variance in order to obtain a permit for a storage building that is approximately 3 to 4 feet into the swim buffer on their property. So a little history on how this happened. The applicant had an existing storage building when the home was purchased more than 20 years ago. The existing shed was destroyed when a tree fell on it from the infamous tornado of last year. The applicant contacted the town of Matthews for a building permit, but was told that Mecklenburg County handles all building permits for the town. In contacting the county, the applicant was told that he was allowed to build the building, but have it inspected after the fact. The new storage building was built in the same setback from the creek, but was expanded towards the applicant's home. After the new storage building was finished, the applicant contacted Mecklenburg County for permit and inspection. This is when it was determined that a permit may not be granted without a variance from the town of Matthews because the building encroaches a little bit into the swim buffer. Now, the town UDO requires a swim buffer variance to be processed as a public improvement variance rather than a zoning variance that is decided by the Board of Adjustment. So a swim buffer is surface water improvement management buffers. They're found in section 155-704-.2. No building is permitted in the swim buffer, which extends 50 feet from a stream or creek. And section 155-704-2F2 specifically deals with appeals and swim buffer variances. So that is where we are getting this process from. And the UDO directs swim buffer variances to go through the process described in section 155-712B, which is the public improvement variance. Now, the planning board may make recommendations on the request and forward those recommendations to the Board of Commissioners. And the Board of Commissioners may authorize variances in public improvement variances with the so here's a picture of the applicant's property. This is 336 Whitefriars. This is the old shed that it appears to encroach a little bit. We do not have an exact location of the new shed or the old shed due to we don't have a survey. But in discussions with the county stormwater management, they have determined that this be permitted without a public improvement variance. I have spoken with the county a number of times, and they are comfortable. They do not oppose this variance, and no either very little or no mitigation would be required per their regulations, which is basically if you impact 125 square feet of a swim buffer, you have to plant a tree. So in summary, the applicant replaced a storage building that was partially within the swim buffer. And they contacted the town of Matthews in Mecklenburg County to inquire and obtain the building permit. They were advised by the county that it was permissible to rebuild the building and obtain inspections and permit after the fact due to COVID-19 concerns mainly. And the applicant was not made aware of the swim buffer until coming back to Mecklenburg County. Building permit. Pursuant to the Matthews UDO, a public improvement variance is the relief for the applicant in order to obtain a building permit. And the planning board is to make a recommendation to the Board of Commissioners. Have also included the applicant's narrative, and photos are attached to your staff report, to the staff report. But basically what we have is, and this is again, I will just say that I've spoken to stormwater management at the county, and they are comfortable with this encroachment, and feel as though this was just something that was overlooked in the permitting process.
Okay, thank you, Rob.
Sorry, the applicant is here, Mr. Schlott.
Okay, first of all, do we have any questions for Rob? Carrie?
Rob, there's mention that this new structure is now larger than the old one. Can you give me the dimensions of both? What's the difference in size?
Sure, the difference in size, and maybe Mr. Schley can chime in, but the new structure is
21 by 24.
Thank you, Mr. Schley. I had it written down, but I couldn't get there fast enough.
The old one, I'm honestly not sure, but I believe it was 15 by, I want to say under that, 12 maybe, somewhere in that neighborhood. But I used the same footprint as I could have easily built this closer to my house. Like if it was that easy to move, I could move it over. And I knew I went bigger. And I also asked that, I asked the right questions when I was doing my due diligence of getting a permit in the first place.
All right. The second question, and I can't tell from the drawings, is are there gutters on this building?
There are not.
Would you consider adding those as a way to help limit the erosion that this new wall surface will create?
I would have no problem with that whatsoever.
My suggestion is with a little bit of water retention processing, whether that's a gravel, 18 inches or so around the structure on the outside, but most importantly, gutters, which is where the biggest amount of concentrated water would come from, with either rain mains or downspouts. I think you could run those with French drains and mitigate any potential additional erosion.
No, I definitely could. And directly behind it is it's a storm. The swim buffer, the whole creek, it's a storm creek. And behind my house, there's a creek behind my house, and it rains. And everybody else's water from going all the way up to Plantation Estates comes down, and it's dry. The water comes through, good flowing. So the little water coming off this roof, honestly, everybody else's water is going there. And I could put gutters, but if you saw it, you'd see what I mean.
Yeah, well, I happen to live on the same situation, which is the only reason I was asking you these questions. I
can do that with no problem. I'm a homeowner. I got caught in, hey, I could have moved that 10 feet to the right and 5 feet to the right and wherever you want. And nobody came down, and I've never even heard of a swim buffer. And I 100 agree with the swim buffer of keeping pollutants out of a creek. I'm all for it. Being a couple feet in, unfortunately, here we are tonight.
So again, Rob, I think from my perspective, again, the circumstances are quite unfortunate. And again, I don't have a problem with the structure or granting a variance. I would like the property owner to consider anything that he might be able to do short of having to go and disturb that area by planting trees or adding any other root-based plants. Yeah,
I've lost more trees to beavers than adding it. I've added so many trees. We have a beaver problem.
All right. That's all my comments. Thank you, Rob.
Since this, permitting and building and things like that are kind of in my wheelhouse, I think Mr. Schley did everything he could to do this right. And I think the mistake was made on the part of Mecklenburg County Building Department. They either should have issued a permit at the time it was requested, and this would have been uncovered, and we could have moved it 2 feet and been done with this. Or if they were not issuing permits, they should have said they would not issue a permit due to COVID, but that's kind of not a good idea either. I think Mr. Sly did do his due diligence. He asked all the right questions. He didn't get good answers from the county, frankly, and he made a decision to build that building where he did based on the information that he had. And I think he bears no responsibility in the error whatsoever.
So, Mike, if I can just sort of add on to that really quickly for you. I think as a follow-up here, that maybe we ought to be looking at what it is our expectations are of Mecklenburg County, and are they following through on those? This is one example. Another quick example where I live. People are always wanting to do patio extensions. The town of Matthews has some specific requirements about proximity to setbacks and so forth, but they defer to Mecklenburg to administer it. And P.S., Mecklenburg does not require permits for patio extensions. So here, Matthews has an expectation, and Mecklenburg is charged with executing that, but chooses not to. And the same thing has happened in the instance we're talking about here right now, too. So again, I don't want to belabor it, but it just seems like maybe there should be a little bit further research into that for different things that we rely on the county for.
Jay, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think Matthews has any oversight of any building. It all goes through the county, correct?
Yeah, we've had an interlocal agreement with the county for decades to handle permitting on our behalf. So it's our zoning code, but they are administering the regulations on our behalf when items come in for permitting. If that makes sense.
Kind of.
Tom, we can have an offline discussion about patios. We don't require permits for patios, but we can talk about that later.
Well, so just quickly, Jay, there is a specific requirement about patios and their distance from the setback. There's no way to enforce somebody doing that over the setback line. So again, we can talk about it separately, but I think it's a failing. So.
Okay, happy to.
So while I'm talking, can I move to approve this request?
Or
is there more?
I'm glad you're prepared, Tom. First of all, are there any other questions or comments?
Just one comment. I know this swim buffer is mainly just about getting contaminants into the streams, and I just recommend maybe any kind of liquids that are in there, maybe move them to the other side of the building or put them off the ground a couple feet. I mean, that's
no liquids at all.
Yeah, just a recommendation. I mean, obviously.
Yeah, I'm not using any liquids. I actually did it for my son does woodwork and it does live edge tables. So there is no liquid. So I'm with you 1,000%.
Okay, cool. I think you got. I mean, as far as the
I keep my lawnmower in my garage. This is like for working and storage man cave.
Yeah, that's fine. Otherwise, I mean, I think it's fine. So.
Okay.
I agree with you.
Okay. If there are no other questions or comments, we'll go back to Tom.
I'd like to move for approval, subject to adding gutters and downspouts to the shed.
Now, this is a recommendation for approval.
Recommendation.
Right.
I would say move to recommend with the request that gutters and downspouts be added.
Okay. We have a motion from Mr. Dorsey. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a second from Jonathan Clayton. So we'll do a roll call vote, starting with Tom.
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
Natasha?
Yes.
Jonathan?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
And Carrie?
Yes.
All right, and I vote yes, so that is unanimous vote to recommend approval of the public and variance for Mr. Sly's building.
Thank you all. Much appreciated.
Thank you, Mr. Sly.
Thank you, Brad.
You guys all have a good evening.
Okay, that brings us to one final motion for the evening.
Where's
Jana?
Jana?
Well, yeah, there's Jana.
Where is she? I was going to say, in honor of Jenna, I recommend.
I think we have a motion from Mike to adjourn. Do we have a second? We have we have several seconds. We have a second from Jonathan Clayton, Natasha Edwards. One last vote for the evening, starting with Tom Dorsey.
So soon, huh? Yes.
Yes. Jim Johnson.
Yes.
Natasha Edwards.
Yes.
Everybody's really smiling. Jonathan Clayton.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Mike Rowan.
Yes, and I'm impressed that we got it done by 9. So
it's not bad. And Carrie, I can't see you smiling because you're audio only. So
Yeah, yes for me, and that was so that my phone wouldn't have died before we got through the last 2 items.
Understood. Okay, and I vote yes. We are officially adjourned. We will talk to you soon. Thanks, and have a great night.
Thank you.
Bye.
Good job. Bye-bye.